So while I work on getting a bed of coals here, I'm also going to be heating up that pan of oil to about 150 degrees. So while I work at getting this accomplished, grab yourself a cup of coffee and stay tuned. So as you can see, I got a good bed of coals going there, waiting for the temperature to get up to about 150 degrees. And in case anybody is curious, I'm just using peanut oil. And as you can tell by the color of it, I've been using it for quite some time. And I have my magnet ready to go just to make sure when I quench it, the metal is not magnetized. Okay, I have the blade in the bed of coals. I'm gonna bring it up to temperature, hold it there for a minute or two, and then I will quench it, cutting edge only. And I'll show that. That's how I harden all my weapon edges. There's no need to plunging this all the way to the spine, because you want the spine to remain somewhat flexible, you know, when you're using your weapon. The knife, this knife in particular. Let that draw back a little bit. As of right now, I'm a little concerned about the front of the blade. I don't think it got hardened enough, but I'll find out here in a minute. Yeah, it's just gliding across the edge, even the front. So, all right. Now I'm going to clean it up a little bit better, get some of the scales off it, and then I'm going to put it in my oven for 2 hours at 420 degrees to temper it. So in case anybody is curious, no, it did not warp. Looking at the blade, I can see that right in through this portion I have not removed as much metal in the grind as I have on this side. So once I get this cleaned up, once I get it properly tempered, then I'll go back and straighten up that grind, and I should have a pretty good grind on it. I got just to remove a little bit on the top of the edge right here to square it up, if I elect to be that picky. Once again, this is for me, and I'm not as picky about the blade shape or everything being 100% perfect. It's just a tool, that's all it is. Alright, I'm going to go to cleaning it up, and then I'm going to stick it in my oven. My tempering process is this. I'm about 420 degrees. I'll set the timer for 1 hour, go through that 1 hour cycle, and then let it completely cool down. And then I'll do that a second time. So I'm actually, running 2 cycles of 1 hour, but the blade does cool down in between that process. And when that's finished, then the next step will be to put the edge on it. Stay tuned. So just a little quick interruption here. I know you guys have probably heard me say I don't throw anything away. That includes all these little scraps of sandpaper here and here, because for me, these are just the perfect size for wrapping around this file to do all the sanding that I need to do on knives. Yeah, I have quite a bit, but I've even got some 1000 grit in there. Alright, carrying on. So as I clean this up, if you guys can look close at the blade, you see this little scaly looking stuff left behind in the blade. What that really is when you get this to a certain temperature, the carbon pulls away from the metal and it leaves this type of pattern behind. It really doesn't affect the strength of the knife. Myself, I like leaving those in there. A lot of guys will take and file and sand all of that away to get a shiny blade. But just to show that they're every bit as strong, here's a knife that I made for my shop. I've had this in my shop for like 25 years now, and you can see that I really got this hot to where that carbon was pulling away. Then you quench it and temper it, and it stays right there. So let me just demonstrate here real quick that these knives can be every bit as strong as anything else when done properly. Edge is sharp. So like I said, when hardened and tempered properly, these knives can really be a work of art. So if you guys can look at that blade in the oven, I like to start with the cutting edge down first, and I like putting it right in the middle of the oven so that the heat can temper this blade evenly. So here we go. So while that is tempering, that's going to be the piece of babenga that I used for the handle. And I've been saving this piece of babenga for quite some time, just because it's got a lot of character right in through the grain here. But I do have a little bit of a issue that I need to resolve, and I'm not quite sure at this point how I'm going to do it, because I really want to use this end of the wood as opposed to this, because there's less grain character on this end. But it's cracking it, little fine cracks right in through here, and I've got some fine cracks right in through here. They don't go all the way through, but it would just be a typical, weathering issue. What I might do is just kind of cut an angle like this and then look beyond the cracks and see what it looks like. So I'm going to resolve that while this knife is tempering. Alright, first hour has elapsed, plus the cooling time, and it's taking on a really beautiful straw to blue color. It's a little blue down in through here, both sides, but it's still maintaining that hard edge with a file. So I'm going to put it back in for another hour. I'll probably lower the temperature just a little bit, because that's the color that I really want right in through here. And if I go a little harder with it, it might turn a little bit more blue, where the metal is thin towards the bottom of the edge right here. So I will probably just turn the heat down a little bit, keep an eye on it, and make sure that that straw color is maintained. I'll show you what it looks like in about another hour plus cooling time. Stay tuned. Well, there's the second heating complete. Get that good straw color, and it's still gliding. Now if you look up here, you can see hopefully where the file kind of grabbed the metal. Remember, I didn't harden this whole thing. I only hardened what would be the cutting edge, and maybe about that much. That's really all you need to harden. So I'm going to go to sanding this down, cleaning it up, tracing the handle on this block of Bubinga. I got my front angle cut here and here because I'm not quite sure where that's gonna place, because you can see where I took a pencil and drew or colored in where the separation of the wood is, those little cracks. So I'll get that accomplished, and then show you what I decided. So I decided that's where the knife handle is gonna fit the best. I've got one little crack line right there that I can work around. Maybe I can sand most of that out, but as you can see, there's nothing on the back side. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to clamp the knife to the block of wood, and then I'm going to drill those 3 holes so that when I go to split it, the holes are already going to be lined up perfectly, because I am going to split this in half and then sand it down smooth, and then those 2 halves will be where I glue everything up or JB weld everything up, but my holes are going to align. Let me get that accomplished and we'll look at the results. So what I'm going to do now is put a pin right here so that that don't move on the front. Stay tuned. So before I remove the vice grip that is on the end, I want to make sure I have another one in place so that nothing moves and my holes stay aligned. Perfect. Okay, now I'm going to go and cut it here, and then I'm going to go split it in half. Well, I got them split. They're not perfectly cut square because I'm using a bandsaw, but that's why I have a table saw, so that I can put a 120 grit piece of sandpaper and sand them flat and flush. I'm going to do that before I glue these onto the handle. Alrighty, I'm getting hungry. It's time for lunch. But before I go in to have some lunch, I got the handle, the wood, the Bubinga, planed down to what I would consider perfection. Let me explain why. If I would have cut this Bubinga on my table saw with an 1/8 inch wide blade instead of my bandsaw that has a very, very narrow, fine cut blade, I would not have been able to match up that grain the way I did. So if you take a look at that grain on the top and on the bottom, which most of this is going to get sanded away to conform to the shape of the handle itself. But I'm pretty impressed at getting that as matched as humanly possible. Let me show you one other thing real quick. So when I was discussing forging this portion in off of my anvil, it lengthened the handle and it lengthened the blade just a little bit. Let me kind of show you what it actually did. And you can see how much more material I got out of the end here and how much more blade I got off the front. So far, so good. All right, I'm going to go and have some lunch and come to work after lunch, get the blade finished up, and hopefully by the end of the day, get those 2 slabs JB welded in place so that in the morning, I can start shaping those. Well, I have it polished down to 1200 grit. Probably going to go a little bit more. But at this point, you'd probably want to see how sharp this thing is. Sharp enough to circumcise a gnat. Well, hopefully this will be the day I complete the task. I've got the wood slabs JB welded in place. I'm going to go ahead and size it to the handle. I'm not going to remove much in the width as of yet, just simply because I need to countersink the holes to pour the silver. So while I work at getting to that point, pour yourself another cup of coffee. So I've got the scales sanded down to the shape of what's going to be the handle. And as you can see, it's still pretty thick. But before I remove any wood and reduce the thickness, I need to test something. Okay, as I've mentioned before, these are going to be poured silver pins. When I was in the cabinetry business, I bought a really good set of countersinks. And what I need to do is check and see if the countersink is going to cause, wood chips or splinters or something like that on this wood itself. Some wood's a little bit more delicate. Like when I put black walnut slabs, I have to be very, very cautious with these countersink tools. And in fact, I have to leave black walnut slabs a lot thicker so that when it does kick out some of the, some of the wood chips, I can sand below that and get a really good pour on the silver. So I'm going to check that out real quick. And first, what I'll do is I'll take a scrap piece of the same kind of wood, drill the same size hole through it, then I will use the countersink that I plan on countersinking with and watch what it does, because then that'll tell me how I can approach this. And as you can see, it grabbed just a little bit of it, which is fine because I can sand past that. So I'm going to go ahead and drill. For me, the view screen's upside down at this moment. I'm going to go ahead and drill these holes back out just to drill out any residual JB weld that may have made its way back into it. And then I'm going to reduce the thickness just a little bit. And then I'm going to go ahead and drill the countersink holes and pour the silver. Stay tuned. Okay, this is the reason why I leave these scales this thick. I did plane everything down, but when I drilled the countersink hole, it took out a chip right there, and that will be easily sanded out when I reduce the thickness. So let me get prepped. I'm going to go ahead and get prepped for pouring the silver, and I'll show you what I do in this step of the process. Okay, I have this side ready to go. All I've done was taken old business cards and block the hole and just put some masking tape over the card itself to keep everything in place while I pour the silver. Now, I'm going to tell you right here, once I pour it, I expect dimples to be in this molten silver as it hardens, just simply because as I pour through, it's going to start cooling off immediately. That's why when I do this process, I bring my silver up to where it's got a blue shimmer to it, and I hand forged myself several years ago a copper ladle. I've got some really really thick copper sheeting, so I was able to do that. I don't know if this is a fact or not, but somebody can probably check into this, but I'm told that copper ladles heat up quicker and they hold the heat longer than those little bag molds. So anyhow, I'm going to get just a little more situated here and then pour these silver pins. So as you can see, I have the knife laying level. So I'm going to start melting some solder and do it to it. So while that cools, let me give you an experience I had with a similar knife that I made a very long time ago. And I can actually date this time pre-moving to New Mexico, because at that time when I was making knives, I was using my Dremel tool and I was etching in my initials instead of stamping them in. So I know for a fact that I made this knife when I was living in Wisconsin. somewhere between 2000 and 2006. And I believe it was early on, and I'll tell you the reason why. Unbeknownst to me at the time, hunting season in Wisconsin is several months long. You have your archery season, then you have your muzzleloader season, which is doe, I think it was, and then you go into your general season, which is buck or doe, and then you go back to the muzzleloader season again, buck or doe, and usually from September through January is how long the hunting season is, depending on, you know, if you take advantage of the rifle muzzleloading and archery season, which is what I did. Well, on one of those hunts, and where I lived in Wisconsin, my neighbor had 80 acres and he allowed me to hunt on his property. I only had 2 acres at the time. So, taking advantage of the long seasons, I lost this knife in the woods. And I was looking for it and looking for it. I asked my neighbors to keep an eye out in case they come across it. And of course, well, if I find the knife, can I keep it? And I said, of course. So anyhow, about 3 to 4 months later, now keep in mind this has been rained upon, snowed upon, melted, the snow, rained upon it again, whatever the Wisconsin season was. And it just so happened to be out there muzzleloader hunting, the late season muzzleloader, and I found the knife. At that time, I was very, very impressed that the slabs stayed to the metal. It did not pull the pins or break the pins out. The only thing that happened to it is that the wood itself swelled. But it remained in place, and I've done nothing with this knife since other than just refinish it. I let it dry out, and then I sanded off whatever finish was on it and refinished it. Now I carry this knife when I carry my flintlock when I'm either deer hunting or, you know, at a rendezvous when I bring my flintlock. But I just want to show you something real quick. As old as this knife is, and as long as I've had it, that edge, whoop, that tore. That edge remained the same. Just a testimony to these knives in general. And of course you can see I forged that from an old file. Okay, the silver solder is probably cool enough for me to remove the pieces of business card and tape and take a look at it. I may have to melt a little bit more silver to pour on top, and as you can see, I kind of had to do that a little bit with here, melt a little bit more to kind of fill in the void. And as far as this over spillage, I'll show you what I do with that. Well, it didn't dimple as badly as I thought. In fact, because the handle is so much thicker, I can sand all of that silver solder clean. So I'm going to get this cleaned up a little bit and probably thin it down at this point to where it feels really good in my hand, because I got to build a dam to where I'm now going to pour the guard, which is going to be, well, it's not really a guard, but something similar to this. Actually, before I carry on, let me just add a little note here. For those of you that are going to be game enough to try this, bear in mind that molten silver will burn and scar the wood. So that's another reason why you want to leave your wood slabs a little thicker than what your intended finish, feel, and grip is going to be, because you'll want to sand away those burn scars. Now I'll tell you from experience, maple burns, black walnut burns, Osage orange burns, and purple heart burns. Really bad. So once again, you'll want to leave them thick enough so that you can sand away not only the silver but also the burn scar. And you guys saw potentially how long that silver can stay on that wood before it cools down enough, to sand them and clean them up. Now, interestingly enough, this wood did not leave any burn scars. I was kind of amazed that did not happen. So anyhow, I'm going to go to boxing this in and get ready to pour the silver. Okay, first things first is put some masking tape where you want the silver to end and not stick to the blade. And just in case anybody's running ahead, yes, I do flux this portion of it so that poured silver will adhere better to the blade, and I will clean out the hole, but that's what I start with first. I block off where I do not want the silver to go, and then bear in mind my intention is to kind of like curve it a little bit, put a little bit of a curve in it. So I need to be a little beyond that so that when I finish putting my curve in there, I end up where I want to reasonably be. Okay, so I'm going to finish this off and I'll show you what everything's going to look like at that point. So that's kind of what you want to be looking for. Make sure you've got good tight fitting spaces between the wood and your mold, I guess. Now, I'm not overly concerned about that because the silver's not going to stick to the wood. It's not as tight as I've gotten some, and it's tighter than I've gotten most. But kind of like look at it and envision what that pour is going to look like once it solidifies. And as you can see, I'm just a little above where my tape line is. That's fine because the silver is not going to stick to the tape. So you should be able to peel all of that away and then end up being a bunch of file work. So let me get prepped and I'll do the pour. But before I get to that, all those little pieces, well, okay, just to reiterate a point, there's that block of wood that I had the knife sitting on. You can see where that hot silver scarred the wood. And this is just, this is a piece of maple. So you can see what it did. Just to reiterate, make sure that, you give yourself enough thickness in your slabs to be able to sand away any burn scars. Okay, with that additional silver that poured over, what I do is I keep everything in a tin, and as you can see, I will melt all this silver solder in here. I made a little pour spout, and then once this all becomes molten, and I'll skim off some of the scum just a little bit, and then I will pour this into the mold. So I'm going to finish getting prepped. I still got to put the flux on the inside here, and I'll just do that with a popsicle stick. It's not really that big of a deal. You may want to do this before you make, your little dam here. That's up to you. Okay, let me finish getting prepped. So if you guys look at that, because I kind of want a little bit of a bevel on this pour, you want to make sure that your blade is sitting straight up so that when it solidifies, you can have a little bit of a bevel in it. And the other thing you want to do is have your can ready to go, so that when you get ready to pour the molten silver, you will have worked out which is the best side to pour from. Now for me, this is not the best side. I'm going to be doing it with my right hand, but it'll be on this side because the vice grip actually clears the knife blade as I'm pouring. So those are just a couple little things you might want to keep in mind if you're going to attempt to do this. Work out the math, the angles first before you make your silver molten. Hopefully I won't have to pour this twice. I've had to do that from time to time. Alright, let's see here. Maybe I got too much flux in there. Let's see here. Oh, not looking bad, not looking bad. Let me get you close up. So you guys can see what I mean about that curvature. But until that completely cools and I look at the underside of it, I'll know for sure if this was a good pour or not. So you might be curious as to how the pour turned out. I can tell you right now, it doesn't look like I have to redo it. It does look ugly as sin, and you should expect it to look like that until you get to filing and doing your cleanup work. Eventually, it's going to look similar to this because I'm going to taper everything to a very small edge right here. It'll take some filing work. I will probably do some of the initial work on the belt sander. I will probably work to get some of this excess silver off right here so that I can recover that. In fact, you know, you can see it's pretty easy. It's still a little warm, but it comes off fairly easy. And I'll just put that back in that little tin container and reuse it the next time I do some more pouring of silver. So I'm going to let that cool down, and then I'm going to go to shaping it, and I'll let you see probably the end result because that's going to take a little bit of time to do that at this point. But what I'm shooting for is, if you can see, there's a taper in the wood from the back of the handle to where it meets the blade, and that's what I'm looking for. And I'm going to do all that while everything is square. The last thing that I do is I round the edges off to get that, for me at least, that perfect fit and feel. And since I'm ambidextrous, I use both my left and right hand. I want this knife to feel as equally comfortable in both hands. Okay, that's all I want to say for now. I'll get this work accomplished, and who knows, I might interrupt in the meantime. Stay tuned and pour yourself some more coffee. Or depending on what time of day you watch this, you might want to just pour yourself another whiskey. But stay tuned. So here's the initial sanding. I decided to do most of this on my belt sander. But there's the initial sanding. And what I'm looking for right now is how clean the line is between the silver and the wood. And if you look all the way around that line's real clean. I still got a little bit more sanding to do right here at the curvature, but I've started putting the rounds in the wood in the top and the bottom, and it's getting there. The final fitting will be with 400 grit sandpaper, but as you can tell, I've got some more, and I will probably do the rest of this with a file, just simply because the silver is just a little lower right in here than I was shooting for, which is fine, because for me, when I hold a knife like this, I like holding it in the bottom curvature, and I have just a little bit of a dip on top here, so that I can, for me, I can grab it and work with it real easy, because I have a positive place to put my thumb, especially since there's not a guard on this type of knife. Okay, I'll interrupt once again when I feel it's necessary. Pour some more whiskey or some coffee. So here's a little interruption. When you go to do the filing work on the silver and you get close to the blade, and that's why I haven't removed the masking tape yet. I've got one little air pocket here that I got to file out. It's not a big deal. It will file out, and it's going to maintain the shape that I'm going for. But when you guys do the file work, make sure your files are good and chalked, and make sure that you have a dead edge on it so that you can work close to your knife blade without gouging it. You see, you got, at least on this file, I've got one edge that's designed for cutting, and the other edge is smooth, so that a guy can get up and do close-up work. So just something to bear in mind, because remember, this entire blade is not hardened. Only the cutting edge is, and maybe, you know, about that much of it or so. So if you go and use the cutting edge up against the blade, especially on the top of it, it's going to gouge it. So, alright, just a FYI, a little bit of a tip. So, it's a little bit of a decision time. If you look at the silver, this little indentation right here is not in the silver itself, that's in the blade. Okay, that's something that I kind of expected when I did this and when I was milling it, just like I talked about some of the indentations right here. For me, I'm not that anal. I really don't care. To me, that just adds to the character and the uniqueness of the knife. Just like right here. Now, if you look right here, that silver did not adhere to the blade at that point. So what I can do, if I elect this, I'm just showing you this just in case you see this and you might want to, you know, resolve the issue for yourself. For me, I'm not that anal, but I'm going to do it anyways, just to show you guys some of the things that you might be facing with if you decide to do poured silver. What you can do, you can see I've got a curve here, and that curve is basically what I was looking for, but because of what's back here, I'm going to now take and curve it a little bit back this way, and obviously I'm going to have to match it on the other side to hide some of that where it didn't bond to the blade. But, you know, like I said, typically I'm not that anal when it comes to a knife. For me personally, you know, as long as it's functional, it holds together well, that's all I can ask for. Just like this little air bubble right here, I don't think I'm going to get all of that out, but once again, it adds to the uniqueness of a handmade knife. So I just wanted to show you that so you can decide for yourself, if you do this, how you could potentially resolve this. Okay, just a quick interruption here. Just simply because I need to stand for a while. That's where I'm at. I'm now filing everything down with 120. I've pretty much got the curvature I'm looking for. I'm still a little fat on this side right here, which is okay because I have not removed that little air pocket, and it doesn't, you know, looking at everything right now, it doesn't look like I'm going to get rid of it. So that just adds to the uniqueness of the knife. I didn't screw this up. No, really, I didn't screw it up. Everything I did was perfect. I hope you enjoy that little humor. But she's coming along really good. It's got a good feel in the handle. And I will tell you, in case you're curious, Bubinga is pretty easy to sand. I've found it to be pleasurable to sand. I've sanded some stuff before that was very difficult, such as maple. Maple, in my opinion, is pretty difficult to sand. So I'm going to keep at it, and then go have some lunch here real shortly. Stay tuned. Now it's probably time for iced tea. I know it is for me. Stay tuned. Okay. There's the final sanding of the handle. And the silver, it's not 100% symmetrical, which is okay for me. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to put some Birchwood Casey's True Oil on the handle to kind of bring this out. Now I did go to 600 grit with the sandpaper, and then I buffed everything with 4/0 steel wool. And you can see even with that 4/0 steel wool, it cleans up that silver really, really good. So let me put one coat of Birchwood Casey's True Oil on this, just simply because I think I've only got enough left to do 2 coats. So it is what it is until I can get to Walmart and get some more. But let me get the first coat on there, and you can see it when it's real glossy. I typically put 5 to 6 coats of Birchwood Casey's True Oil, but you can kind of get a really good glimpse of what that's going to look like once that's already hardened and polished up. So anyhow, that's all I'm going to put in this video, because pretty much you guys understand sealing the wood and everything else. My final step will be once again wet sanding the entire blade with 1200 grit, just to get out any slight imperfections, scratches where I may have slipped with the sandpaper up here. So thanks for watching, and everybody have a wonderful day, a wonderful week, and I hope that you enjoyed your tea, your whiskey, or your coffee. We'll catch you next video. Bye.